Hi guys, good evening and welcome to today's session. You can go ahead and drop a message for the others to join in. So it's more or less saying good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching this class from. I think we can go ahead and start, but meanwhile, go ahead and drop a message on the groups, be it Discord or Telegram, so that we can have the others join in. Thank you.
Yeah, hello guys. Good morning. Let me just say good afternoon, whatever your time is. Welcome to today's class. Please, if you are here, go ahead and drop a message on the Discord server so that others can join in. We're already live. We have instructor here on the call with us. Welcome, Newton.
Hi. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on your time zone. Thank you very much, Amaka.
All right. Thank you too. Thank you for having us. Thank you for being with us today. So the floor is all yours.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks everyone, wherever you're watching from. So today we'll be talking about introduction to communication, right? Communication is everything that we do, everything that we do in our both our homes, in our offices, in our various places of work, and it's important we just dive into it a little, and then to see how we can improve on some of these aspects of communication, and then some other key things that makes up communication as a whole. So before we continue, right, I would like to go a little bit into how you know what makes up the term communication, right? And then before we can then now go into defining what communication is, and then other aspects of communication, I think that is very important for us to look into. So, communication as a word, right? It actually derived from is a Latin word, so it simply means to share, right? So it could be to share information via any means or any mode. It could be just to share. So right. So it could also be verbal sharing, it could be also be symbol, body movement, depending on whatever means of communication you want to use to make whatever thing you need to share known to your audience. So going deep, we just want to get a very clear and a simple definition of what communication is, right? So it's basically a process whereby two or more people or a group of people, right, exchange information or ideas or thoughts or feelings, right? So just like I have on my screen here, communication is just a process of exchanging information, right, between two or more people, right? It could be, like I mentioned earlier, right, the information sharing could be verbal, it could be written, it could also be body movement, as it may be. So communication to have said for communication to happen, right, or for us to say that communication has happened between two parties or members of a team that are involved in the communication, there are some certain elements of communication that need to happen, and have been able to bring them, or rather list them in order in which this communication happened. Uh, the process from the sender down to the person that receives this information. And we're going to go deep into each of these elements of communication, right? And then we try to understand where each of these communication elements comes in, and then where some information, or rather communication, can also go wrong along this element of communication. So maybe through misunderstanding of what the original sender intends to convey, or rather, you know, maybe even the sender actually sent the wrong message, maybe through the tone, or maybe through the tone of writing, or maybe through the body movement, or whatever means of communication that the sender, or rather initiator of the message, intend to use. So the list of this, or rather, these elements of communication include, the sender, the message itself, right? The encoding, the channel that's going to be used to send this message, the receiver, that's the person receiving the message, the decoding process of that message, the feedback from that message, and then the context to which that message must have happened. So I will take the first one, which is the sender, right? So when we talk about sender as an element of communication, so this is basically speaking to an individual, right? Maybe you as a person, or a group of persons that are that wants to send information to another group of person, or also an individual. So it's basically an entity that is initiating this communication, either by creating the message or information. So that is exactly what the sender is talking about. So when we say who is the sender of a message, it simply means the person who is initiating that message. So the other part of element of communication I want to talk about, excuse me, is a message, right? So this is just this is the information itself, right? That's the information itself, or the idea, or rather the content of the sender, the content that the sender intends to communicate to the receiver. So that is the message. So what we are doing currently, right? We are having a communication, or rather, I'm passing an information to audience who are listening to what we are doing currently here, right? So at this point, I am the sender of this information, and whatever you are hearing is a message. So like I mentioned, the message is the information or the idea, or rather the content that the sender intends to communicate to the receiver. So this message itself, as an element of communication, can actually take different means or different forms, right? So like I mentioned earlier, the message could come in form of a written message. It could come in form of a verbal communication, like a face-to-face communication, right? It could also come in form of a body movement, right? For example, in our homes, especially those of us that grew up in Africa, some parts of Africa, right? There are some things that you do in your home, and then there are some kind of body movement that your parents do, or kind of facial expression that your parents makes, even without making a verbal communication. You already know what your parents are trying to pass to you, and then you adjust accordingly, right? So like I mentioned, the message can come in different forms. It can come in verbal, it can come as a written message, it can come as a face-to-face communication. So that is another element of communication, that is very key for a message, for us to conclude that an information has been conveyed from a sender to a receiver. Now, the third part of it is the encoding. So encoding as an element of communication, right? So I want you to see encoding as a process of converting the intended message into a format that can be transmitted, right? So like I mentioned, I have a sender, I have a message in my head that I want to send out. So that ability of me as a sender to convert that message to a readable format, or to an understandable format, is what we call the encoding process. So this encoding simply means that I have a message in my head and I want to send a message to my boss or my parents. I decided to, pick a paper and then start writing it on the paper. So that is the process of encoding a message, right? Or it could be through email, right? I have a message I need to pass to an organization, and then I pick up my laptop or my phone, and then I start composing a message, typing a message. So that is the process of encoding a message. So when we say encoding, it's just the process of converting the intended message into a format that can be transmitted, right? So like I mentioned, it can also come in various forms, both speaking of words, letter writing, visual presentations, and the likes. So the fourth one, or rather the fourth element of communication also that is very important, is the channel, right? The channel is the means or the medium that you want to use to convey that message, right? That the sender wants to use to convey that message to the receiver. And communication channels can be of different kinds. I also mentioned it earlier, right? So the channel could be maybe through phone call, through later writing, uh, through face-to-face communication, verbal communication. It can come in any form, facial expression, body language, and all of that. So those are different, different channels in which I can use to communicate a message from a sender to a receiver. So even when you look at the right side of the screen, where you can see this element of communication, rather the process of communication, right? This was derived by this image was brought by Woodward, right? So you can see that you have a source at which a message is coming from, which is in this case is a sender. You have a message itself that needs to be decoded and passes through a channel. And then for the receiver to even understand what you are sending, the receiver needs to decode those messages and the likes. And that brings us to the fifth item as part of the element of communication that that must be involved for us to say a communication has happened um, between a sender and a receiver. So in every communication, right, there must be a receiver, right? So if you are sending a message, right, you have your sender, which is yourself. You'll be able to get your message ready, encode it. You have a channel you need to pass that message to, right? Somebody needs to receive that message, right? For us to say, you pass a message. So when you pass a message and there's no receiver to receive it, we cannot say that communication has happened because, the message is halfway, right? So it's like, making a phone call to someone and then the person didn't pick the call, right? You could say, okay, yeah, I've sent a message, or rather I've sent a text message to my friend, to my boss. But at the end of the day, the person didn't see the message, or the message didn't arrive, or there was no receiver to receive the message. So in this case, you can't say that communication has happened, right? So when we say a receiver, this is basically, you can see this as an individual or a group of people that are at the receiving end of communication who intends to interpret this message, right, that the sender is actually sending. And for them to be able to interpret the message that the sender has sent, they need to decode what is in that message, right? And that brings us to the sixth item, which is decoding of messages. So we, even in for those of us who love movies, there are some kind of movies that you watch and somebody wants to pass a message to someone and he probably doesn't want people within the channel to know what that message is. You can encode the message in a format that, a lot of people may not easily understand. But when the receiver gets to that, when the message gets to the receiver, there's a way the receiver can, adjust the letter or adjust the message, and then it will be able to decode what the sender is trying to send. So when I say I'm leaving the office, for example, by 12, maybe I read an email to my boss that I'm leaving the office by 12 p.m. today, for example, right? And my boss didn't read that message. At that point, communication has not happened. Even if my boss reads the message, yes, my boss understands that I said I was leaving office by 12. So it was able to decode that I'm leaving the office by 12. But at that point, I didn't also provide more clarity to the reason why I'm supposed to leave office before office hour, right? So for a receiver to fully understand your message, they need to decode what the sender has sent. So decoding simply means a process of interpreting or making sense of the received message. I don't think it's more than that, right? It's your ability to understand, or rather make sense of a message that was sent by a sender whenever you receive this message. So the effectiveness of communication depends on how accurately the receiver decodes the message. So when a message gets to me, and yes, I saw the message, but I did not understand it as a receiver, the communication is at that point is basically not effective, because I got the message that was that the sender intends to send, but I couldn't make sense of it. So at that point, that communication is not effective, right? We can't say that communication has completely happened, because all the elements of communications involved has not taken place. So the second to the last I want to discuss on this element of communication is feedback, right? The other one I want to talk about is feedback. So when a message gets to a receiver, right, I look at this message, I understand this message as a receiver of a message. And I'm also going to give, two or three more examples to this element of message that I'm trying to make sense of here, right? I will just give a two key example for us to understand it more clearly. So when a message gets to me, right, as a receiver of message, I was able to make sense of it, but I didn't send the feedback, right? It simply means, effective communication has not happened, right? So what it means that, yes, I understand the message, but how will the sender know that whatever he or she has sent to me, I was able to understand it and I was able to decode it, right? So the only way for that to happen is for me to send the feedback. So even in our homes, your parents are going out and then they needed to just give you one or two assignments. So I'm leaving the house, I'll come back in 2 hours. Please take the broom and help the family to sweep maybe the parlor or the kitchen. And then you keep mute. At that point, we can simply say, yes, the message has been passed. Probably you receive it and then you decode it, or rather you decoded the message, but you didn't send the feedback. If you just say that, yes, mommy, I heard you, or yes, daddy, I heard you, or yes, I heard you, basically. So that is the feedback I'm talking about. You give feedback for the sender to understand that whatever message he or she intends to pass to you, the receiver was able to get the message and he decoded the message properly. That is where feedback comes into play. So see feedback as a response or a reaction from a receiver, which provides that information to the sender about the message, that he or she has sent, right? So whatever the feedback means. So the feedback also will also give you as a sender, that sense of understanding that, yes, the message I've passed, the receiver received it and he understood it properly, right? It can also give you that understanding that, the message I've passed, I don't think they understood it properly because, of the feedback I got from the receiver. So which means that probably the message you sent they were not able to decode it correctly, probably true because of the tone, right? Or maybe you as a sender, you didn't send the right information. So the last part I want to talk about as part of this element of communication is the context, right? For every communication to happen between one or two persons, or rather between two persons or between group of persons, there must be a context to which that communication is about to happen. So context basically is just the surrounding circumstances, right? The surrounding circumstances behind that communication, right? So
All right, guys. So I noticed I think it's a network glitch or something. Let's just give Amaka a couple of seconds or minutes. I'm sure she'll be back up probably the next 2 or 3 minutes. Okay.
when the sender, or even when I'm yet to decode it. So it can be, or the interpretation can come in different form. But when you just mention that first instances, I've asked this, but he has refused to give me. So it totally just blocks other possibility that can come in as part of that message. So it's important that in the same, still on the same context. So it's important that the messages are clear enough, right? And the way the messages are being conveyed from a sender to receiver is also very important for an effective communication basically to happen. So going to the next screen, which is a part I want us to discuss, the types of communication, or rather the types of communications that happens between people, right? I have mentioned these a couple of times while I was trying to explain what communication means. So the types of communication can, these are the basic types of communications. There might probably be other more, but these are the 5 key categorized types of communications, and they include verbal communication, non-verbal communication, written communication, visual communication, and digital communication. And then I'll just pick them one by one to also explain, or expatiate a little about those modes of communication. So number one is the verbal communication. So verbal communication is basically using spoken words to convey message, just like what I'm doing now. When you send someone a message with your mouth, it simply means that communication is being conveyed using spoken words. And then the expectation also, right, in most cases, is that the person also responds to you verbally. So when I say, how are you? Please come and join me on the table. That's a verbal communication. I just convey a message and the person says, yes, thank you. There's a response, which means that the person was able to decode the message and then the person was able to give me feedback. A verbal communication is said to have happened. And in most cases, it could be through phone calls, it could be face-to-face conversations, it could be a video conference conversation, right? So that is number one part of, that is one basic types of communications that I want us to understand this afternoon. So the other part is a non-verbal communication. So this communication could be through body movement. I already gave you an example before. So for some of us who grew up in African homes, there are some things that you do, there are some things that you do both in your homes and outside. And then when your parents or mom sees you and your mom makes some kinds of adjustment in facial expression, and you just quickly understand. And there are some other scenario where you could be in the parlor and then your mom's friends comes to the parlor to visit her, and you just pick up your chair and sit down in the parlor, keep watching whatever you're watching, and then your mother makes some kinds of expression. You could easily decode that your mother just wants you to go inside the room, right? So it could also be in a form of, again, for those of us in Africa, right, or grew up in African homes, there are some parts that you go for a visit and your friends or family friend's house ask you to come and eat, and there are some facial expression that your mom makes. It's simply telling you that, you shouldn't even try to accept that offer to go and join them in the dining table, right? So that's another another example of a non-verbal communication. So it is basically communicating through body languages, right? We could also see it in some group of people who have, hearing issues and all of that. They make use of signs and symbols using their hands to communicate with one another or using their hands to communicate to public, right? So it could be facial expression, gestures, right? So it could also be, tone of voice. There are sometimes you just, it's a sign and you just gave a communication to someone, right? I didn't really speak anything, right? I didn't really open my mouth to convey information. I just made a sign, voice tone, and just to let the person know that someone is coming or something is about to happen, and the person can easily decode, receive and decode it. So those are some parts of non-verbal communication that falls into this number 2 category, right? So it can often convey different kinds of emotions, especially this non-verbal communication, right? So in most cases also, for people who are not so conversant with the usage of non-verbal communication, the understanding of that message can also be altered along the line. So the third part is the written communication, right? Written communication is, as we all know, right, is basically communication through written words, such as letters, such as emails, such as reports, such as text messages, right? So you go to a popular social media website, or maybe WhatsApp, for example, and when you type hello, someone responds, hi, how are you doing? These are different kinds of written communications that can happen. If I write an email to my boss, it's another part of communication that's happened through email, right? So through letter writing, letter writing is not so popular these days, right? But again, if I write letter to my parents, to my families, that's another part of communication that has happened through written communication as a type of communication. So the fourth one is the visual communication, right? This is basically communicating through visual elements. And I will give you a typical example. For those of us who are good in mathematics, right? Or rather, I believe a lot of us who are here have done mathematics at one point or the other, probably economics, right? When I present charts and graphs and diagrams to you, right? When you look at it, even without saying anything to you, right? Provided I've labeled it, probably I've labeled it correctly. When I present a chart, a graph to you, when you look at it, there are some graphs I will present to you, and then you can even make a lot of sense out of it, right? And when you look at it, you know that this graph is talking about so thing and so thing. And from understanding from this year to this year, there was a lot of this that happened, and there was less of this that happened. And then when it gets to the third year, this happened, and there were even less of this that happened. So this is another means of communication through charts, through visuals, through charts, through graphs, and all of that. So graphs and the charts, all of them falls under this, visual means of communication. And the last one I want to take here is a digital communication. So digital communication can be seen as communications that are conducted, through digital technologies, probably through instant messages, social medias, and online collaborative tools, especially those of us who use collaborative tools. So these are the very basic types of communications that we have. The last part which I want to talk about here is the importance of effective communication. The importance of effective communication. We all know that, even with the use of all the examples I've been giving for a while, for the roughly for the past 30 minutes, right? You can understand that effective communication, is very important, right? When you want to send an information from one point to another, right? That information needs to be very clear, right? It mustn't be that detailed, but the information you need to pass should be clear. When I'm talking to a child, right, for example, and I say, please don't touch this iron because it is hot and it will hurt you or you will get burned when you touch it. That information is very clear and it is direct enough that whenever the person hears it, right, the person will understand what I'm trying to say, even when you are not a baby, right, to say. right? So these are the basic, these are the few points I've come up with as part of the importance of effective communication that we need to have in our everyday life. And when you start practicing these good and effective communication skills, you get to understand that with time, right, it becomes part of you. It becomes part of you, and because you are practicing it every day, it becomes part of you. People get to like you because of the way you talk, right? And because of the way you communicate to people. And again, I will also give you an example. There are some things in my life. Ordinarily, when I say, when we're trying to be, when we're growing up, there are some things that you say, I don't want to do this, or even if when I'm told to do this, you just don't want to do it. And so even when I'm told to do this, I don't want to do it. But at some point, there are ways that your parents, your mom will talk to you, your friends will talk to you, and at some point, you don't even have any option that you just start doing it. Even things that that you intentionally or initially said you were not going to do, you just find yourself doing it because those people understand the context at which that communication is about, at which that communication is happening. They understand you as a person, right? And then they know exactly how to send that information, or rather communicate to you in a way that you will assimilate it very quickly and in a very understandable format. So the number one example of importance of an effective communication is that it builds and maintains a good relationship between people, right? So this is not just a case of um, people who works in the office per se. Even in your homes, in your relationships, in your everyday life, right? When you have an effective communication, it helps to improve or increases the bond between you and the person you are communicating with. So effective communication, it's more like a cornerstone for for a healthy and a meaningful relationship between people, between yourself and your clients, uh, and people around you per se, right? If you are asked to do something, you understand it clearly and you give a feedback. And when you are done doing it, you send the person a message, yes, I've done this, and the person understands. So when that keeps happening all the time, me as a sender of the message, I know that whenever I give you a message, once you are done with the message, or rather a task I've given you, usually send me a feedback, right? At some point, if it keep occurring all the time, at the top of my head, I know that whenever I give this person a message, he always deliver. And if he's yet to do it, I won't get a response. So even when I'm yet to get a response, I will still have it in mind that my teammate was going to deliver this task for us, and whenever he does that, he's going to send us a message to notify us that he has done that, and people just get to like you for that because you have an effective way of communication. So back to the number one importance that I said, that it helps to maintain relationship between people, and then it helps also build people trust. So the second part is that it helps to resolve conflict among teams, which is conflict resolutions, right? If communications are not properly passed, right, it can there are tendency for you to start apportioning blames, right? There are tendency for you to apportioning blames. There are some things that happen, and when the issues start boiling, people start pointing fingers, and why did you do this? Didn't you use your head to know? You should have been able to use your head to know that I said we shouldn't do this. Do you understand? So when there's a clear and effective communication amongst people, both in our homes and our offices, it helps to reduce conflicts among people. So it's important to have uh, this lifestyle of having a great or a good effective communication, because it also helps to for conflict resolutions. The number three item is that it helps to enhance productivity, both in your homes, in your place of works, and all of that. When a communication is clear, right? It's clear, it's direct. The sender sends a message, and the receiver was able to decode it and understand it properly. At the top of my head, I already know what to do as a receiver of message. right? Because I understood the message clearly, I know what is expected of me. All I need to just do is start implementing whatever task I need to do, or rather start implementing whatever the message needs to do. And at that point, it helps to increase productivity at the end of the day. But when a message is not clear, the message was sent, I wasn't able to understand it, or there was no clear instruction on how to go about an item, I found out that at that point, I start doing what we call, trial by error, or try maybe guesswork. When I do this, it doesn't work. I try the other means, it doesn't work. I tend to try a lot of things, and at the end of the day, I simply, you know, I simply don't get it correctly, right? So at the end of the day, maybe at the end of the day, I was able to get it, but I found out that I have lost a whole lot of time trying to figure out how to go about it, right? Something I would have been able to do within 1 hour or maybe 30 minutes walk. And I found out that it was able to, at the end of the day, it took me 5 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, or rather, even in most cases, the whole of the day, or even 2 days, right? So at that point, you can see that my productivity has been affected simply because there was no clear instructions, there was no message. I mean, basically, the communication was not clear, right? So it's important that we have these effective communications to increase our productivity, even in our homes, in our offices, in every day of our life, basically. It helps to increase productivity. Um, the other part of it is that, this effective leadership, when you have people who you are managing, right? Uh, or people who are managing per se, and you have a great communication skill, right? Your method of leading people, in most cases, at the end of the day, it's sorry, give me a minute. Okay, so you can find out that the way at which you manage people within your team are usually very effective, simply because you have a great communication skills, right? It's important that even in your homes as parents, when you pass information to your children, right, or people who are living within your vicinity or within your home, you send them a message. The messages are clear, they are direct, you understood what you want them to do, right? And when you come back, you see that there will a lot of progress, and the way you are leading them, it will look as if you are doing so much, but at the end of the day, you are literally not doing so much. But because you have a great way of communicating uh, with your team members and people that lives within your area, and they know how to understand and decode messages that you send, and they see you as a very great and effective leader. So the other part of it is that another importance of effective communication is knowledge sharing, right? Effective communication, this is important because when you talk to people in different walks of life, and you share information to them, they get to understand you, decode the messages and all of that. You have past knowledge, no matter how small it is. When I say maybe I want to travel, so maybe I want to use a particular airline to move from Nigeria to other parts of West Africa. And then I just get the message, don't use this particular airline. They tend to do this and all of that. At the end of the day, someone has passed a message to me, and it's a knowledge I will have at the top of my head in order for me to not to do that mistake, right? So knowledge sharing is another importance of having an effective communication, because people will understand you. People, whatever you pass, because of the clarity and the way you present your message, people will understand you, and it will also assimilate in their head, right? So the other part is uh, decision making, right? Decision making. So when you pass information correctly to people, right, it helps them to make the right decision. When you, I just give you an example, right, on knowledge sharing, which is also applicable to this item number 6, decision making. Even as a child that is growing up, and you are trying to counsel them, on the path at which they want to go through, when you give them this knowledge, right, you pass this knowledge to them, they understand different career paths, what it entails to be this, what it entails to be a medical doctor, what it entails to be an IT consultant, what it entails to be a business owner, right? So when you pass this knowledge to them, when they want to make decisions around those career, because you have passed the necessary knowledge and the information is clear, they were able to understand is customer satisfaction. When this is another aspect of effective communication, when you have a client or people who you are managing or customers per se, or maybe as a customer service person or as a product manager, you pass the necessary information. So maybe your software is down at that point and you need, people are panicking about your product that you are managing. When you send out a message and say, we are currently having a downtime, for example, right? And this downtime is expected to be for 2 hours. After that, the platform will come back again, and then business can continue as usual. When you pass that information, even people who are furious with you, people who are not so happy with your product, they will know that, when there's an issue on your platform, you usually send out a message, right? People get to be satisfied with what you are doing, but your clients, your customers get to be satisfied because at all points there's an effective communication going on between the parties that are involved. The number 8 part is your emotional well-being, right? I have seen a scenario whereby a communication gap that happens between two employees, and at the end of the day, one of the employee who were, should I say, who is at the receiving end of this heat, you know, uh, start having some kind of emotional issue, right, at the office space and all of that. It has having this self-doubt and all of that, because there are no clear instruction, no clear communications on what to do and what not to do and all of that. So when you have a clear communications skill and clear communications are being set out in your organizations, like I mentioned, this is not always pertaining to organizations, even your homes, right? There's this emotional well-being. My boss has, there are a lot of people who are actually afraid of their boss, even as of today. At least I can also speak that from experience. During my early days, I'm usually afraid of my boss. But for every time there's a clear information and the clear communication of what I need to do, and I know that before the end of the business, or rather before the end of the day, I have completed that task I was given. There's this emotional satisfaction that I get for the next day when I'm going to the office, because I know that the task that was given to me, the informations were clear enough. I understand it. I was able to decode it, and I have been able to carry out that task effectively without any glitch. So there's this emotional satisfaction that you get as a person when there's a clear communication uh, that has happened between you and the other people involved. The last one here on this item is conflict prevention, right? This, I just also gave you an example of a conflict that happened between colleagues, one of the previous workplaces. So it helps to prevent conflict because, everything is clearly stated, everything is well laid down. We all know what is expected of us to do, right? So the issue is that when there's any person or any part of the team that was not able to do whatever thing that they need to do, at that point, when issue arise, we already know how to resolve it. Everybody has done what they're supposed to do, but this person didn't do his or her part, of which the communication was clear enough. So this helps to prevent some of these unnecessary conflicts that happen between individuals, between teams, in an organizations also, right? So in every communication that we have, I say, all right. So this is more like being able to, implement some of these effective methods of communication. If you are asked to do something, right, or if an information gets to you, for you, even though that you understand the information, it's also very important to me. I do that in most cases. So when I'm having meetings with clients, when I'm having meetings with my superiors, and even other members of my team and people that I'm managing per se, right? When this information gets to me, right? If I understood it correctly, I know that this is straightforward, right? It's something I don't necessarily need to ask more questions to understand. But if it's something that is new to me or something I totally do not understand, right? Or something I'm trying hard to understand. When this information goes to me, and in most cases it could be a verbal communication, what happened is that, I try to repeat what you have said, right? So in the process of repeating what you have said, or rather trying to repeat what you have said in my own understanding, right? In your own presence. So when I'm trying to repeat what you have said in my own understanding, while you listen, when I'm done, you can then now easily affirm that, yes, I have been able to decode what you have said to me, but I just interpreted it in another format, right? Or maybe, yes, I was able to understand what you said and I have just interpreted it even in a better way that you are trying to convey it to me, right? At that point, it is clear between the two parties that a communication has happened. Both parties have understood what is needed to be done. The encoding and decoding process have happened, and we are all satisfied that, this information has clearly happened. Now, another reason why I do this is because for some reasons, right, there may also be some tendency for me to understand it in a different manner, right? When information is being passed to me and then I'm hearing it for the first time or it's not so clear, when I try to repeat it, there are some instances that I try to repeat what the person has said or make inference from what the person has said. And at the end of the day, I find out that I'm actually making the wrong inference, or maybe my understanding is way totally off from what the person is even saying. So it's important that when a message is being sent to you from a sender, you try to repeat it, try to understand clearly, make sure that you're on the same page with the sender, and you know that all the necessary elements of communication, all the boxes have been checked before you can then now proceed to action or implement the message. That brings us to the end of this section. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any question, think I'm open to question and answers. Thank you very much. Maka, you still there? Hi, Amaka, can you hear me? Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay.
So much, Nyechi.
Let's go on, Amaka. I can hear you. If you didn't hear me before, I was asking if there's any question maybe from viewers and I need to take so I can respond to it.
Okay. So there are questions. I just put one up on the screen now. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so this question is saying, do you think there's a disadvantage of communicating?
Well, I wouldn't say there's a disadvantage of communicating, right? The intention behind communicating is for people to understand and for you and the receiver to actually be on the same page. I don't think sorry, come again. Disadvantage of communicating. So yeah, I don't think there's a disadvantage of communicating. But yeah, there could be some disadvantage of over communicating, right? But I don't think there's a disadvantage of communicating, basically. Do you
All
have
right.
any other
So
question?
yeah, there's another question here. You said, under types of communication, can we classify 3, 4, and 5 as subtypes of non-verbal communication?
3, 4, 5.
3, 4, and 5, yes.
Well, we can't say they are. You can't classify 3, 4, and 5 as non-types of verbal communication because in the digital communication, in most cases, right, it can also be non-verbal. Did you get that? Ramaka, did you hear me?
Oh, okay. I think I just heard you now. So I believe
Oh,
you have answered that. My network is
yes,
a bit tricky. So
yes,
I'm
I have.
bringing up another question. It says, what is the greatest barrier to communication?
So basically,
All right, so I think Amaka is finding it difficult to join back. Um, Hi Amaka, can you hear me?
Hello, Marv. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Hi,
so I
Marv. Can
just
you hear me?
I can hear you. There's an echo, right? There's an echo, and it seems like the network keeps throwing you off. Okay, I just wanted to mention that the questions, right? The questions that we are dropping in the chat will be answered on Telegram, right? I just responded to one of the questions now on Telegram, so I think that was from Isaac. Okay, and if you have any other question, do well to drop it in the chat here. All right, or you can also bring it to Telegram. Thank you.
All right, I think we've come to an end of this class. Guys, if you know you filled the attendance form has been dropped in the chat. So go ahead and fill your attendance. You also have a tax that was assigned to you. I think I've been dropping that tax since yesterday. So go ahead and check the groups. You would see the PM tax and you can start working on it. Every detail you need is there. If you feel confused about the questions, you can go ahead and drop a message either on the Discord server or the Telegram channel. Either ways, we would always respond to your messages. That being said, have a lovely morning, afternoon, or night wherever you are. Bye, guys.